And, we said we moved at the end of 2022, but actually the dream and the vision to start Courageous Church actually began in late January of 2020. Before that kind of like little thing happened that changed the world. Just before that moment, I was actually away on a leadership trip in the Highlands of Scotland. Anybody ever been to Scotland? Anybody ever been? Okay, a few more people in this service. Yeah, it's great. Scotland is everything you would kind of hope it would be. It's beautiful. It's majestic. This is what it looks like, look at that, people. Look at that. I love Charleston. I've fallen in love with our home. We absolutely love being here. But I probably do miss a little bit of elevation, a little bit of a view. When it's just the Ravenel, that's the only way that you can get up. And you got 6 lanes of traffic and somebody having road rage next to you and just trying to have a moment, it just doesn't really work. But I have the privilege of serving on the leadership team of the family of churches that Courageous Church is a part of. We actually have churches all over the world, in Southern Africa, East Africa, across Europe, UK, the Middle East, in India, all these kinds of amazing, beautiful parts of the world. And so I have the privilege of serving on that team. And we were away over 4 years ago, and we're seeking God, we're seeking vision. And this is where God started to speak to me and Saz about coming here to Charleston. And it was really exciting. But then there was a moment where I wasn't sure we were actually going to make it out of Scotland alive. Because in between these kind of mega meetings that we were having, these life-changing conversations, we would go out on adventures. And the 4 of us, we do have a little wild streak. So at one point we jumped in a loch, which is kind of a sort of big frozen lake at that time of year at 1 o'clock in the morning. Don't do that. That was a bad idea. We abseiled off the side of a cliff in heavy snow. Don't do that, especially when you don't take the proper gear like us. But this one day we said, okay, well, let's take it easy. Let's just do a hike. And so this picture here, this is exactly where we were. And this rock up here is called the Old Man of Storr. And there's, it's kind of like there's all these legends and all these stories about what it is. But it's a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful walk. And you kind of come up the mountain on this path here, and then you traverse around, and there's this big ridge line where you can actually look down on the mountain and you see the view. And it's just stunning, absolutely stunning. Only problem is, this is what it looks like in July. This is what it looks like in January. And, I love a bit of snow, it's a good bit of fun. But we sort of had this big meeting, this morning meeting. And actually, that was the meeting where this kind of moment of like this call to come to Charleston sort of came into my life. And honestly, I was kind of in a little bit of shock. And, kind of like trying to still get my head around, oh my goodness, we're going to move, we're going to start a church. This is going to be crazy. But we decided, right, let's get out. And let's do this walk. And so it's about a 4 or 5 hour walk. So we left at about midday, got there about 1 o'clock, and thought we've got just enough time to do this hike before the sun sets. That is never a good thing to think before you're going to go on a hike in the Highlands of Scotland at the end of January, okay? Always leave yourself a lot more time. And so this is us at the base of the Old Man of Storr. And you can see it's not too bad. There's not that much snow. We're thinking, oh, it's fine. We'll make it through. I'm the little one in the middle. I know you were trying to figure it out. And, I mentioned that we have a treat. In 2 weeks' time, the gentleman at the back is our senior pastor, Gary Snowzell. He and Heather, the senior pastor of our movement, are going to be here in Charleston with us that Sunday. So you do not want to miss it. It's going to be a really, really special time. And so, this is all good. And then we start walking around and we start to get up onto the ridgeline. And obviously, I don't know if you've noticed, I'm not a massive guy. And so I was up to my waist in snow. And, I'm thinking, this is fun. But then we're thinking, oh, it's going to be fine. So we get up onto the ridgeline, and then the weather really starts to come in. And we knew that this could happen, but we thought we'd risk it anyway. But as we get up onto the ridgeline, we have a complete, what's called a whiteout. And this storm comes in, and we literally cannot even see 5 to 10 foot in front of us. We can't make out any of the landmarks. And this is us at the top of the mountain celebrating that we're still alive. Because we didn't take a map. We just had a phone. I had 2 ice axes and a rope. That was it. That was how prepared we were for it. So we got up onto the top, and then, as we're up on the top of the mountain, it's like, right, we need to get down, and we need to make sure that we get down swiftly. And so one of the boys, he sort of says, right, I think it's this way. We start walking in that direction, and there was a couple that had gone ahead of us, and suddenly we started to see their tracks. So we thought, brilliant. Let's just follow them down the mountain. Let's hope that that they know more about what they're doing than we do, and we'll follow them down the mountain. We got about half an hour following these footsteps, and one of the guys said, I don't have a good feeling about this. I'm not sure that we're going in the right direction. Only to realize that it wasn't that couple's footsteps, it was our footsteps. We were retracing our own footsteps back down the waist-deep ridge of snow, and the sun is starting to go down. And at this point, the four of us, we're quite jovial. We love an adventure. We'll do things like that. But there was this moment where it was like, no, we could die. We need to get up this mountain. We need to get off this mountain. And so we managed to get back up and get over, and we made it down alive. Way. But you know what? I've thought about that moment. I've thought about that adventure. I've thought about that second where it was just, we had no idea where to go. We literally just could not see the path. And maybe you've never been up a mountain in a snowstorm in the Highlands of Scotland, but I'm sure that you, like me, have found yourself at time to time asking, where am I going? Where am I going? What is the direction my life is on? Where am I headed? Where am I going? And do you know what? Easter's amazing because it's great to celebrate and have some fun and the kids, get the candy. But Easter's one of those marker points in our year where it's also an opportunity for reflection. It's an opportunity to pause. Some of the kids are clearly having a great time today. It's an opportunity to pause and ask ourselves, where am I going? Because Easter is so much deeper than just a celebration to remember something that happened 2,000 years ago. Because actually what happened 2,000 years ago is still happening right now. Jesus is still risen. There's this question of where am I going? But just like us up at the top of that mountain, when we find ourselves in those seasons, often what it is we have a perspective problem. We didn't have a fitness issue. We didn't have a kind of willingness to do something issue. It's that we just literally couldn't see. And so often in life, when we find ourselves in those seasons, like us up on that mountain, we end up going back. We end up retracing steps. We end up going back on a path that perhaps we never intended to. And do you know what? This Easter Sunday is going to be more than just celebrating something that's done. It's actually what Jesus wants to do on your journey right now. Because this whole concept of where we're going and the path we're on, it reminds me of my favorite story in the Easter kind of narrative, and one that maybe you will have never heard about. And we find it in Luke chapter 24, and it's all about something called the road to Emmaus. It's one of my favorite bits in the whole Bible. We're going to jump right into it. So Jesus, he's coming to Jerusalem. It's been, he's had this kind of sham trial. He's been wrongly accused. He's then on Good Friday. We've obviously just celebrated it. He's put on the cross and he dies, and then he rises again on Resurrection Sunday that we're celebrating today. This is the day that we're talking about. It says this. Now that same day, two of them, these are followers of Jesus, were going to a village called Emmaus, about 7 miles from Jerusalem. Now, we're just going to quickly pause here because there's some context that's so important. So we got these two people, and they're followers of Jesus. They're not part of the disciples, the 12 people that Jesus has called together, but they're actually this group of people that has been following him and wanting to go after him. And here's the interesting thing. We learn later that one of this pair is called Cleopas. And we obviously can't go back in a time machine and absolutely verify it, but the vast majority of historians and theologians agree that, in fact, the pair was Cleopas and his wife. And here's the really amazing thing. His wife was actually the sister of Mary, Jesus' mother. So in reality, there's a strong likelihood that this couple is actually Jesus' aunt and uncle. And actually, they were in Jerusalem not just to celebrate, a tradition and kind of maybe you're going to go back home today, or maybe your parents have come here for Easter Sunday. It wasn't like that. They were going to Jerusalem because they had hoped that Jesus was the answer. They had hoped that Jesus was going to be able to do what they had dreamt about him doing. They had gone following him. And I believe that them going back to Emmaus, I don't think it was that they couldn't get an Airbnb to stay in Jerusalem. I don't think their time had come up and their hotel pass had kind of gone. I think actually what they were doing is they were walking away. They were almost retracing the steps. Imagine the conversations that were happening when they left Emmaus. It's going to happen. Life's going to change. He's going to do it. How's he going to? Can you imagine the conversations just like us up the mountain? It's going to be great when we get up the top. It's going to be amazing. Only to find in this time of being lost and confused and not knowing where to go. I actually think that we could almost argue that it's almost kind of like a moment of failure. It's almost like a moment that they're giving up. It's a moment that they're saying, well, I tried last time, but I'm just going back. I'm going back to Emmaus. I'm going back to where I've been from. And it says that they were talking with each other about everything that happened. Can you imagine? Especially if it was Jesus' aunt and uncle. Maybe they knew stuff about Jesus we've never heard. Maybe they knew things about him that nobody else did at that time. They had such a hope of what was about to happen. And get this, as they talked and discussed these things with each other, Jesus himself came up and walked along with them. You know, Easter Sunday is powerful because we have an empty tomb. Our sin and our failures is paid for and over forever. But the reason why this story is my favorite is because even on Easter Sunday, where these guys were walking away in their doubt, in their fear, in their confusion, God doesn't send a leader. He doesn't send a prophet, doesn't even send an angel. Jesus himself came and walked alongside him. Of all the things to do on Easter Sunday, of all the priorities, having just risen from the grave, of all the things Jesus could be doing, he goes and walks alongside the doubters. He goes and walks alongside the people that are actually walking away. There is something of a beauty that this teaches us about who our God is. I believe some of us find ourselves this Easter a little bit like Cleopas and his wife. I think some of us find ourselves in seasons where it just feels like, I don't know what's going on. I don't know which way to go. I can't see. I just feel like I may as well go back to what I've known. And Jesus himself wants to come and walk with you in this season. It says he came up and walked along with them, but get this, they were kept from recognizing him. What? I don't know about you, but if I was them, I would want Jesus and all the bells and whistles to turn up right then. Don't you? Like, I didn't grow up going to church, and I went on this amazing journey of coming to faith, but there was a moment where I prayed and I said, God, if you're real, I want you to show me. And I kind of like, I almost had this immediate like waiting, like a bolt of lightning or a flock of doves or something like that. I would have wanted him to turn up. I mean, come on. Let's say that he meets them halfway into the first mile, right? 7 miles to go. This could be an old couple, maybe with hip or knee issues. He could save them the journey. He could save them the hassle. But instead of just turning up, he does something deeper and far more powerful. You see, they could see him, but they couldn't recognize him. I think often we don't recognize Jesus, even though he is right there. We have an expectation of what it would look like. We have an expectation of how he would move. In fact, we often have a demand of what we want him to do. Actually, he wants to come and walk alongside us. And so there they are, and he comes along, and they're doubting and they're questioning. And get this, he comes on, they can't recognize him. He says, what are you discussing together as you walk along? I mean, this guy, Jesus, he's the problem. He's the reason that he's like, these guys are going through something. And he comes along and asks them a question. I mean, what? Jesus is trying to get something deeper. You see, often we want answers when Jesus is trying to ask us a question. Often we want the answer to the thing that we think we need when Jesus often knows something far deeper and far more life-changing. I love the response that they give. It's so me, it's so you. They turn around and they say, are you the only one? It's almost like they turn around to Jesus, the King of Kings, the Lord of Lords, and turn around and say, are you for real? Who are you? You're crazy. Are you the only one? Maybe that's how life feels for some of us. Do you really know what's going on for me? How could God turn up and start asking me questions? Doesn't he know the pain I'm walking in, the challenge I'm walking with, the doubt, the questions, the different things? But it's something that Jesus is doing, because he doesn't reply and reveal himself. He says, what things? You see, Jesus wants to have a dialogue. Jesus wants more than a moment. He wants momentum. I want your relationship with Jesus to be more than a moment this Easter. And in fact, one of the reasons why we're saying, hey, come back in April, is because I believe that you will really start to see Jesus and really start to see life change when you walk with him day in, day out, day in, day out. You see, Jesus was more interested in what's going on inside of Cleopas and his wife, and not just what was going on outside of them. But you know what? So often I think our faith, and I'm exactly the same. So much of my talking with God is about what's going on around me. Can you do this for me? Can you do that? God, I need breakthrough. Can you do this? And maybe if we're honest, perhaps our sort of relationship with church is we kind of turn up when things are hard, and then when things are good, we kind of go back to the life that we lived. I said it a few weeks ago, but there's no atheists when a plane goes through turbulence. It is, isn't it? But I think so often, it's like there's often rarely atheists, when it's like, Lord, I give you my life, just let this plane land. But I think that what Jesus is trying to teach us is that Easter was more than a moment. He could have turned up and bam, done it. But he wanted something deeper, something so much more powerful. And so they start walking together. 6.5 miles to go, and they turn around to him and they say, "What about Jesus of Nazareth?" They replied. "He was a prophet, powerful in word and deed before God and all people." And just for a second, imagine that it is his aunt and uncle. They literally know everything. There might have been miracles they know about that we've never read about. There might be things Jesus did that they know about that we never. They knew so much about Jesus, but here in this moment, it was clear they didn't know Jesus. I think even maybe for some of us, we grew up in church. Perhaps you even know the Bible better than I do, but Jesus is asking you, do you know me? I want to know you and be known by you. And then it says the chief priests and the rulers handed him over to be sentenced to death, and they crucified him. And remember this, their lives are now at risk. That's why they're running back to Emmaus. That's why they're going back. But get this, all hangs on this. It says, but we had hoped. You see, they weren't just in Jerusalem for tradition. They weren't just turning up at the Passover. They were hoping for something, but they couldn't see that it was happening right in front of their eyes. See, they had hoped for something that was just going to change their outside circumstances. They had hoped that Jesus on Palm Sunday was going to come in and lead a revolution, and then suddenly it was going to turn around, there'd be justice for all and all these different things, and that's right. But they had an idea of what that hope would look like that was different to what Jesus was actually trying to do. You see, it's hard to believe when our hopes don't materialize, isn't it? It's hard when we want God to do something, but we want him to do it so specifically that we may miss what he's actually really doing in us. You see, the beauty of the fact that where we sit in history is we know the end of the story. We know that the cross, we know that the empty tomb, they're right in the moment. We actually have a daily hope because of the cross. We have a daily hope. They say to Jesus, they say, we hoped he would do this. And then they talk about, and some people went to the grave and they haven't found him and we couldn't see him. There's this moment they just couldn't see what was going on. And there with people that honestly, let's put it like this, should have known better. Jesus starts walking with them. And beginning with Moses and all the prophets, he explained to them what was said in all the scriptures concerning himself. He doesn't turn around and tell them, what are you doing? He doesn't turn around and say, how can you not? He walks with them for 7 miles with holes in his feet and holes in his hands for 7 miles. I believe that, even as you come back to church next week and the week after and the week after, and just give April a try. Just give April a try. I believe that Jesus is going to walk with you. And guess what he's going to do? He's going to bring old truth, but bring new eyes. Right? This old couple, they knew it all. They'd been with Jesus since he was young. They knew what it was, but there was a moment on the journey where he brought old truth, but gave new eyes. It says that when they were reflecting on this later, they said, were our hearts not burning within us while he talked on the road? Was there not something stirring and going on deep within us as we were with him on that road? You see, the reality was that Jesus was speaking to their hearts over their heads. Jesus was trying to transform something inside, not just reveal something in that kind of space. And hey, guys, I'm a head guy. I want to know, I want to understand. I love kind of like some of those questions. It's not wrong, but there are moments and seasons where we so want the answers up here and Jesus is trying to do something in here. This Easter, I believe that Jesus wants to begin a heart transformation that will lead to all of the other things that we need. It says this, and band, if you want to come and join me as we start to land this story, it says that as they approach the village, so they've walked this 7 miles, they still don't recognize him, they still don't get it, there's something's going on, their hearts are burning, but they're not sure what's happening. Jesus continued on as if he was going further. I mean, what? There's so many times that God does stuff that just doesn't make sense to me. It's almost like he spends this whole journey walking, and then when they get to their house, he's like, all right, see you later. But you know what? I believe Jesus was wanting to see what was in their hearts. Jesus was wanting to see what they wanted in this moment. You see, there comes a time in every one of our lives where we need to invite Jesus in. Where we need to say, do you know what? No, don't walk off. I want you in my house. It says that they actually urged him strongly. One of the Bible translations says they constrained him. This old couple grabbed the Son of God, the King of Kings, and said, no, you're staying with us. You're coming in here. They managed to persuade him, saying it's nearly evening. It's dangerous. You can't walk on. Think about it. You know, they've just done this 7-mile journey. They're under threat. And it says, and day's almost over. So he went in with them to stay with them. You see, when we don't invite Jesus in, it's hard to see him. The reason why I want to say come back next week and come back next week and come back next week is because it's a way and an opportunity to say, Jesus, I want you to come in my heart. I want to put myself in a place where I can sit around that table with you. What's amazing is that it says that when he was at the table with them, he took bread, gave thanks, and broke it. And he began to give it to them. And if you've spent any time in church, you'll know that what Jesus was doing is he was walking them through something called communion. It's this symbol of remembering what happened on Easter. His body broken like the bread. His blood shed like the wine. But you know what? This was only the second time that he'd ever done it. It only happened once about 3 or 4 days earlier in that upper room with his disciples. But it was at this moment that their eyes were opened. It was at this moment that they recognized him. It was at this moment that they realized he was trying to do something more than just change their external circumstances. It was at this moment that they realized what they hoped for wasn't just the change in the world around them, but it was the change within them. It was in this moment where they suddenly saw as he ripped the bread apart and they looked at him and it's him. It's you. And they saw what they really needed. They saw what their soul really craved. A salvation that was far bigger than a change in circumstances. A change that was, as they'd gone on that journey, was so much deeper. You see, the clarity came with communion. The clarity that we seek in our lives so often is not necessarily about understanding our circumstances, but actually understanding who's with us right there with us. I want you to meet Jesus. I want you to start walking with him. I want you to start inviting him into your home because he is a good God that in your darkest seasons of doubt and confusion will walk right up alongside you. That will patiently take you through the things that you need to look at and lead you to moments where your eyes get opened. I believe for some of us, that's going to be a moment right here, right now, today. But for maybe some of us, it's going to be next week or the week after. Or maybe as we celebrate baptisms in 4 or 5 weeks' time, it'll be that moment. But here's the invitation today. Just start walking with him. Because he's already there walking with you. It says this, that they recognized him and get this, he disappeared from their sight. I just don't get it. Why didn't he just turn up? Why did he disappears? It's almost like he says, well, what are you going to do now? What are you going to do now? And this old couple with their aches and pains, their fears of their circumstance, get up at the very nighttime they said to tell Jesus to stop walking. And it says they got up at once and they ran back to Jerusalem. They ran back. There was an urgency. There was a fire. There was a revitalizing. Hope that was thought to be dead was actually alive. And with every step, Cleopas and his wife at 1 o'clock and at 2 o'clock in the morning walked into a situation that they were actually in danger. They were actually under threat. And they said, because he's risen, we now live. And today is your and my opportunity to run back to him. It's our opportunity to turn on our Emmaus road, however long we've been walking it, and say, I'm coming back to you, Jesus. I'm running back to you, Jesus. Maybe for you, you grew up in church. Maybe you had a powerful moment with God as a young person. Maybe you wanted to live for Him, but things happened. Life happened. Tough things, and I'm so sorry it did. But Jesus is here walking with you on that path. Maybe you've never known Him. But Emmaus for you is just your own world and your own life. Perhaps you've been in your Emmaus for a few years now. It's looking pretty sweet. But God's saying, come back. Come back. They find the disciples and they say to them, it's true. The Lord has risen. I want to tell you right here, right now, today, Easter is not a minimal story in the pages of history books. It's a real, undeniable event. And because He is risen, so too can we. My closing thought and closing question to you is this. Jesus wants to walk your life with you. Will you walk your life with Him? Today is an opportunity in your Emmaus, or maybe you're a mile on the journey, 6 miles, 5 miles, maybe you're in your own home. This is your opportunity to say, I see you. I see what you did, and I'm running back. I'm coming back. Because it was only in Jerusalem that they found their place. It was only in Jerusalem that their people and their purpose and the call of God was upon their life. And so here today in this moment, I want to give you the opportunity to say, Jesus, I'm turning and I'm coming after you. Maybe today is a moment of recommitting. Perhaps even Easter today is the first time you've been in church, first time you thought about God, maybe all year, I don't know. But today is a moment to say, Jesus, I've followed you once before. Here today, I'm choosing to follow you again. Or perhaps for you, like me 24 years ago, it's a moment where you're going to say to Jesus, for the very first time, I want to follow you. Easter is good news because on that cross, Jesus took every single thing you and I had ever done, thought, said wrong, and He wiped the slate clean. You don't need to live in shame. You don't need to live in the shadow of your past. But just like Cleopas and his wife, you can run into freedom because it is true. He has risen.